Hey, friends. Today I had an interesting thought come through, and it's probably related. It's almost certainly related to the fact that I'm rolling out another version of my piano course, the Mindful Piano Intensive. I've actually just repackaged the content that I created a while back. I am now planning to also create some new content, but the first step is to kind of get everything back put together and ship it off to the people who I have promised it to. If you are one of those people, look out. It should be headed your way very soon. And in just being reconnected and sort of immersed in that material again, something was coming up this morning that I speak about on the course. And this is very much in keeping with my general approach to music and piano that treats the piano as a laboratory for life. So the reason why piano practice makes such an effective mindfulness practice is because it's an incredibly complicated process that's taking place. It's accessing our being on all these different levels: physical, psychological, emotional, intellectual, mathematical. There's so much going on in our system as we play the instrument. And so it makes, in a lot of ways, it makes a good place to experiment with techniques and practices that have application to our broader life. Because at the very least, yes, piano is complicated, but it's not as complicated as life. It's at least a little kind of confined practice, domain of focus, where we can unearth and discover how we work, and then apply those lessons to our larger life. And so one of the ones that was coming through today that I just happened to be reflecting on is the idea in my course of what I call focus navigation charts. And that's a term that I totally invented to describe something that I started doing in my own practice, and that I now get pretty rigorous about with my students, which essentially amounts to, when we're working on a passage that's difficult, a lot of times what will happen is there's a quick succession of things that has to happen in quick succession, and we have to find a way to be able to get through that succession cleanly. Or, because we have two hands, surprise, we play piano with both hands. So there may be things happening at the same time, or seemingly at the same time, or close enough together that our brain can't separate it. And a lot of times what makes something difficult is not so much that the sheer physical, technical demands are so enormous, but that cognitively we don't have a clear chart of where to put our focus in every moment that makes the ultimate execution possible. And this is almost more, again, this is back to my whole thing about a mindfulness approach to piano. This is almost more of a mindfulness practice than it is a musical practice or a piano practice, because what we're really talking about on the sort of most fundamental level is our sense, our control of our own internal focus. Where are we internally looking? Now, it may be looking with our eyes, but it may also just be distributing focus into our felt sense of the keys, what our hands are doing, the sound. But where are we directing our focus in every moment in order to make that execution possible? Because what frequently happens is it's happening so fast that our mind starts to try to do two things at the same time, or it starts to try to put its focus on two things at the same time. And that is not possible. We can't focus our attention in two places at the same time. We can do two things at the same time. We are absolutely capable of, clearly, since we play piano with two hands, we're doing two usually quite separate and distinct things that are very different from each other at the same time, all the time, most of the time. But that doesn't mean that we're thinking about two things at the same time, or that we're putting our focus on two things at the same time. And that distinction, if we can get that distinction, then we can start to consciously construct, okay, here's where my focus goes first, and then maybe I can put on autopilot the next couple of things my left hand has to do or whatever, while I, in the meantime, put my focus over here and then do this with my right hand, which actually really requires me to look or requires me to be focused here. And then maybe we have to switch our focus back or back and forth, or our focus may have to bounce, a dozen places in a very short space of time in order for us to execute something that's difficult or that requires kind of multi-level execution. But the key to it all is really getting clear that we can't put our focus in two places at the same time, and therefore we need to consciously we need to decide where it's going to go, what order will work, and this is somewhat a matter of choice. This is something that, not all people might do this the same way. We might make different decisions as to what our own focus navigation chart looks like. But we do need to know clearly what we're doing, and we need to know the sequence, because if we're unclear on the sequence, then, like I said, our mind starts to try to do two things at once, or starts to feel pulled in two directions at once, and everything freezes up and we're lost. And this was coming through for me this morning as a kind of big picture life practice, because I was like, wait a minute, I get really explicit and really rigorous about this on piano, but doesn't this apply to life? Isn't this also a phenomenon that we experience in our daily life, or certainly in our long-term life, as we come in and out of phases of work and we try to manage all the different dimensions of our life, all the different aspects of our life that are sort of constantly moving. All of us is moving through time. Our entire life is moving through time all the time. Obviously, we're not focused on every single aspect of our life all the time. That would be, we'd have split, like we'd have a fractured personality if we tried to do that, or even if we successfully did that. So it's not about keeping it all in mind all at once. It's about, where does our focus need to be? And what sequence do we need to move our focus in through these domains, or through, one domain even, in order to be successful, in order to have our life feel like it's under our control, feel like it's nourishing us, it's supporting us, it's sustaining us. We're not just competent, but excelling at our various pursuits. So again, in this way of taking a step back from the life process, I was just asking myself this morning, what are some ways in which I can really look at utilizing my focus in a deliberate way, in a conscious way, run some experiments regarding, how well is this working? How well is it going? If I try a certain way of using my focus, what happens? What's the result? Because that's something that I think it's easy to overlook, or it's easy to attribute a lack of success to our own incompetence in a certain area, or this is just how it always happens to me, or I'm just not good at X, or I always get we get a sense of the cycles of life, the karmic merry-go-round feels like it just goes around and around in certain areas of our life, and nothing ever changes. And it's almost like you get frozen. My mind goes into gridlock when I try to examine certain problems, certain issues in my life. And so I was like, but hold on, don't I have a practice for this? Don't I have a whole philosophy about why that happens, in a laboratory called the piano, where I run this experiment constantly, and every single time it turns out that when something feels impossible, when something feels like it's a train wreck every time, and so then the idea is often like, or the response is often like, well, let me just try and run the train even harder down the track, and it still crashes, obviously. I was like, don't I have experience of this? Don't I have a whole technique for unpacking what's really going on when I have that sense of a kind of a train wreck, or it doesn't have to be a disastrous train wreck, just a kind of sticking point. And what if that technique would also be helpful in life? What if really monitoring, okay, I'm going to take my focus and I'm going to do this with it every 1 hour a week, or 1 hour a day, or every 15 minutes for 3 hours, or whatever it is, whatever the appropriate distribution of focus is for what we're dealing with. See if taking that slightly meta position of not making it about the thing we're doing, the thing we're so desperate to be successful at, and taking it one level back to, well, what am I learning about the employment of my focus? What am I learning about the employment of my attention, distributing my attention in a skillful way? Let's start there. That's what I tell people on piano too. I say, don't make this about music. Don't make this about ultimately doing the thing, because that can get that starts to infuse us with a different kind of motivation, which is, FYI, very important and very, very much relevant. But there's a whole mindfulness process that we can engage in, and we kind of want to put everything down. We want to not be judging that process by the standards of, am I playing the piece well right now? We want to let ourselves have time to figure out, okay, well, what's internally happening here? What do I really need to be doing? What does my focus need to be doing in order to get a successful result? And then run that experiment and see how successful it is. And instead of being invested in the success of that, become invested in the observation of our process, of what is my focus doing. That just showed up for me today as a potentially fruitful way of approaching life. Thanks for watching, folks. Appreciate you. So much love. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.